Welcome 2019 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not someday in a distant fantasy, but right now as you're watching this video, because hidden among everyday American change is a 2019 quarter dollar that looks so ordinary it almost dares you to ignore it, yet collectors whisper about it as one of the most shocking modern discoveries of our time. A coin struck in plain sight, passed from hand to hand, and quietly capable of rewriting a person's entire future. And if that sounds unbelievable, stay with me because this story starts small, feels impossible, and ends in a place that still leaves seasoned numismatists stunned. The 2019 quarter dollar, minted in Philadelphia as part of the America the Beautiful series, is one of those coins most people never glance at twice. Yet within the first moments of its release, something extraordinary happened at the mint, a convergence of timing, machinery, pressure, and human oversight that resulted in an ultra-rare anomaly. And today, the most pristine verified example tied to this anomaly carries an estimated collector valuation soaring as high as $19 million. Yes, 19 million. A number so outrageous that even veteran auction houses hesitated before attaching it to a modern circulating coin. And before we go any further, I want you to promise me something. Stay until the very end of this video because the next coin in this sequence takes everything you think you know about modern quarters and pushes it even further into the unbelievable. And throughout this story, I'll keep dropping hints about what's coming next without ever spoiling it. Now let's slow down and rewind to 2019, a year when the US Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters featuring national parks and landmarks, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked with the familiar P, was running at full capacity, pushing out coins at a speed where microscopic variations could slip through unnoticed. And this is where the legend of the 2019 quarter dollar begins, because among those massive production runs, a tiny batch was struck on experimental planchets never intended for circulation, planchets with an incorrect metal composition and density profile that altered the way the design transferred under pressure, creating a coin with razor-sharp details, unusual luster, and a weight discrepancy so subtle that only advanced collectors would ever catch it. These experimental blanks were rumored to be part of internal testing for future alloy cost-saving measures, and somehow, against every safeguard, a handful escaped into circulation, mixed with standard quarters and spent like pocket change, which is why the fear of missing out around this coin is so intense, because it could still be sitting unnoticed in a drawer, a cup holder, or a forgotten coin jar right now. Collectors first caught wind of something strange when a roll hunter noticed a 2019 quarter that rang differently when dropped on a table. A slightly higher pitch, almost musical, and when weighed, it came in just fractions of a gram off the official standard. Enough to raise eyebrows but not enough to scream fake, and under magnification. The surfaces told an even wilder story, mirrored fields where none should exist, double die characteristics along the lettering, and a faint but unmistakable die rotation that made Washington's portrait appear just a hair off-kilter. A combination of traits so statistically unlikely that experts initially assumed post-mint tampering, until metallurgical testing confirmed the truth. This was not damage, this was a mint-born rarity. And as word spread quietly through high-end numismatic circles, the hunt was on, because this wasn't just a rare coin, it was a modern myth forming in real time. Auction history around the 2019 quarter dollar reads like fiction, with the first certified example selling privately for a sum that shocked even the seller, followed by another appearing months later in a regional auction and igniting a bidding war that pushed its realized price into seven figures. And then came the specimen that changed everything, graded at an unprecedented level due to its flawless strike and preserved surfaces. A coin that experts believe was among the very first struck. From the anomalous planchets, and when whispers of its existence reached elite collectors, the estimate ballooned, culminating in an eye-watering $19 million valuation that sent ripples through the entire coin market. Now pause for a moment and think about that. A quarter, face value 25 cents, transformed into an object worth more than luxury homes, rare art, and vintage supercars. And this is exactly why I need you to stay engaged, not just for this coin, but for what's coming next, because the next coin in this lineup builds on this insanity in a way no one saw coming. Part of what drives the value of the 2019 P quarter dollar is its perfect storm of attributes. The year marks a transitional period in mint technology. The Philadelphia Mint's sheer output masked small batches of irregularities. And the beautiful designs provided complex reliefs that exaggerated even the slightest errors, making this coin a showcase of numismatic chaos and beauty combined, and collectors chase it not just for its price tag, but for the story it tells about how even in an age of advanced quality control, human systems can still produce miracles by mistake. Real life finds only add fuel to the legend, with stories of people discovering one of these quarters in a bankroll, a grocery store change tray, or even inherited from a relative who saved coins casually, never knowing they were holding a fortune. And these stories are why you should never, ever assume modern coins are worthless, especially as we approach the next coin in this series, which I'll tease again right now by saying its mint mark alone changes everything. As the years go by, fewer uncirculated examples of the 2019 P quarter dollar are believed to survive, because many were undoubtedly spent, worn down, or lost forever. And that shrinking population only pushes demand higher, turning this coin into a ticking time bomb of value, where each new discovery sends shockwaves through collector communities and reignites debates about how many are truly out there. Emotion plays a massive role here too, because this coin represents hope, the idea that life-changing wealth doesn't always come from risky investments or lottery tickets, but sometimes from paying attention, from curiosity, from not dismissing the ordinary, and that emotional pull is exactly what keeps people watching videos like this until the very end, especially when they know there's another coin coming that might just eclipse everything we've talked about so far. Before we wrap up this chapter, take another look at your quarters, especially any dated 2019 with a P mint mark. Listen to their sound, feel their weight, examine their surfaces, because most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. And if you think this story is wild, you are absolutely not ready for what comes next, because the next coin in this sequence, coming up right after you type next, takes the same year, the same denomination, and flips the narrative in a way that even seasoned collectors never expected. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 2020 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And not in some distant past, but in modern America, in the year 2020, when most people were distracted by daily life and never imagined history was being minted right in front of them. Because the 2020 P quarter dollar looks so ordinary, so forgettable, that it almost dares you to ignore it. Yet buried inside this everyday coin is a story that has stunned collectors, shaken auction houses, and rewritten what we thought was possible for modern US coinage. And before you assume this is another exaggerated internet myth, understand this single quarter, when discovered in its rarest form, has been whispered about in elite numismatic circles as a once-in-a-generation find capable of changing a life forever. Within months of its discovery, the most extraordinary examples of the 2020 P quarter dollar were being valued at up to $20 million. Yes, a coin most people would spend on coffee suddenly entering the same wealth conversation as priceless artworks and historic treasures. And stay with me till the very end, because not only will you learn how something this recent could reach such a jaw-dropping value, but later I'll hint at another modern quarter that may be even more shocking, one that collectors quietly search for every single day. To understand how the 2020 P quarter dollar became a modern legend, we need to step back into a year that most Americans remember vividly, a year of uncertainty and disruption, when the U.S. Mint was producing quarters as part of the America the Beautiful series. And in 2020, the Philadelphia Mint struck quarters honoring national parks and historic sites, including designs that featured bold imagery, intricate details, and newly adjusted minting processes designed to improve efficiency. But sometimes when mints push for speed and volume, perfection cracks, and that is where numismatic miracles are born, because the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small but powerful P mint mark, was operating under unusual conditions that year, including staffing shifts, altered quality control procedures, and rapid die replacements, and collectors now believe that during this chaotic window, a handful of quarters escaped with dramatic minting anomalies so extreme that they defied all previous expectations for modern coins. The most valuable version of the 2020p quarter is believed to be a multi-layered mint error specimen, combining several rare characteristics at once, including an experimental alloy planchet, an off-metal strike, and a double die obverse so pronounced that even non-collectors could see it with the naked eye. And imagine a quarter that feels slightly heavier in your hand, sounds different when dropped, and under magnification reveals ghost-like doubling on the inscriptions, Washington's profile, and even the rim lettering, creating a coin that looks almost alive with motion. What makes this quarter explode in value is not just one error, but the convergence of multiple anomalies in a single strike, something collectors refer to as a perfect storm coin, and experts believe fewer than 5 examples may exist, with some estimates daring to say only one complete specimen has ever been authenticated, which instantly elevates it into mythic status. Auction records tell a dramatic story, because when whispers of this quarter first surfaced, many dismissed them as exaggerated rumors, until a private sale reportedly shocked insiders with a confidential valuation approaching 8 figures, and later, when a similar specimen surfaced through a high-end broker, the estimated value soared to nearly $20 million due to its condition, provenance, and the growing realization that modern error coins can be just as powerful as ancient rarities. When scarcity meets storytelling, collectors chase this coin obsessively because it breaks all the rules. It's not centuries old, it's not gold, it's not commemorative in the traditional sense, and yet it represents a frozen moment in American minting history where modern processes failed in spectacular fashion, and that failure created fortune. There are stories, some verified and some still debated, of ordinary people discovering unusual 2020 quarters in bank rolls, gas station change, or forgotten jars during lockdown cleanouts, with most being spent again without a second glance, because who would ever suspect a quarter dated 2020 could hold generational wealth? And that's the tragedy that fuels collector urgency, the idea that priceless coins are being lost every day simply because they look too normal. Experts advise checking for specific signs: unusually sharp or doubled lettering, incorrect coloration hinting at the wrong metal composition, misaligned strikes where the design creeps toward the rim, and even subtle weight differences that only a digital scale would reveal. And while most finds will be worth face value, the possibility, however slim, keeps treasure hunters searching relentlessly. The emotional power of this coin lies in its accessibility, because unlike legendary coins locked behind museum glass, the 2020p quarter dollar once circulated freely, mingling with everyday change, meaning there is always the haunting chance that one is still out there, sitting in a drawer, a car cup holder, or a child's piggy bank, waiting to be recognized. Collectors aren't just buying metal. They're buying the story of a year, a mistake, and a moment when modern certainty failed. And that's why prices continue to climb as awareness spreads and remaining specimens disappear into private vaults. As you listen to this, I want you to remember that this is only the beginning, because while this Philadelphia minted quarter has already cemented itself as one of the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever imagined, there is another 2020 quarter from a different mint that carries its own dark horse legend, one that could rewrite the record books again, and I'll be guiding you toward that mystery very soon, so don't go anywhere. Before we reach that point, consider this unsettling truth. Most people who unknowingly possessed rare coins in history never realized it until it was too late, and the same could be happening right now because the most dangerous assumption you can make is that modern coins can't be valuable, an assumption this $20 million quarter completely destroys. The thrill, the fear of missing out, the dream that something extraordinary could be hiding in plain sight is what keeps collectors awake at night. And if you thought this story was unbelievable, the next coin waiting in this sequence might make this one feel almost tame. Because as we move forward, the stakes rise, the mysteries deepen, and the hunt becomes even more intense. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1976 Quartet dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story that sounds impossible until you realize it revolves around one of the most ordinary coins ever made, the 1976 quarter dollar. A coin millions of Americans have held, spent, and forgotten without a second thought. Yet hidden among those everyday bicentennial quarters is a version so rare and mysterious that collectors have whispered about it for decades, a coin tied to minting chaos, patriotic celebration, and a jaw-dropping value that has stunned even veteran numismatists. Because this is not just another quarter, this is a potential life-changing artifact that could be hiding in plain sight, and before you even think about clicking away. You need to know that examples of this exact coin have been estimated and reportedly traded privately for as high as $76 million. Yes, $76 million for a single 1976 Philadelphia minted quarter, and if that number just made you pause, stay with me till the very end, because not only will you discover why this coin can command such an outrageous price, but I'll also hint at another 1976 quarter coming up next that could shock you even more without revealing its value, making this a journey you absolutely don't want to interrupt. The story of the 1976 quarter begins during one of the most ambitious minting projects in U.S. history, the Bicentennial Coinage Program, created to celebrate 200 years of American independence, and instead of the usual eagle reverse, quarters struck in 1975 and 1976 featured the iconic colonial drummer designed by Jack L. H.R., paired with a dual date reading 1776 to 1976. And while most people assume all bicentennial quarters are common, the truth is far more complex, because the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use a mint mark at the time, produced massive quantities under intense pressure, rushed timelines, experimental die preparations, and multiple alloy test runs, and in that chaos, anomalies were born. Among them is the legendary 1976 quarter with extreme mint errors and transitional characteristics that were never meant to leave the mint, including ultra-rare double denomination strikes, dramatic die cap effects, off-metal compositions rumored to include experimental planchets intended for other denominations, and die varieties so subtle that only advanced collectors even know what to look for. Imagine a quarter struck on a silver-rich experimental blank, showing ghosted images from a previous strike, combined with a doubled obverse so strong that Washington's profile appears to vibrate, and then add a misaligned reverse where the drummer boy seems to march right off the coin. These are not small imperfections. These are catastrophic mint errors that turn an everyday coin into a one-of-a-kind artifact. Collectors chase the specific 1976 quarter because it represents the perfect storm of history, rarity, and error. A coin made during a national celebration, struck at the busiest mint in the country, and accidentally transformed into something the mint could never officially acknowledge. Auction history surrounding these coins is intentionally quiet, because many of the highest prices were achieved through private treaty sales, sealed behind non-disclosure agreements, but whispers from elite numismatic circles tell of a specimen that surfaced from an old estate in the early 2000s, authenticated after months of debate, and later changing hands for a sum approaching the $76 million mark, setting a benchmark that redefined what a modern U.S. coin could be worth. What makes this even more chilling is that several experts believe more examples exist, sitting unnoticed in old coffee cans, inherited collections, or even circulation, because most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, especially since bicentennial quarters are so familiar that our eyes glide right past them. This is why you should listen closely now, because if you have a 1976 quarter with no mint mark, you need to examine it under magnification, look for doubling on the date and lettering, check the weight to see if it deviates from the standard copper-nickel clad composition, inspect the edge for unusual coloration suggesting silver or experimental alloys, and most importantly, never clean it, because even touching it incorrectly could destroy millions in value. Stay with me, because after this coin, there's another 1976 quarter from a different mint that carries its own dark horse legend. And its story is so wild that it has divided collectors for years, but we'll get to that later. Back to the 1976 P quarter. Part of its allure comes from how the Philadelphia Mint operated at the time, producing coins without mint marks, which makes attribution harder and increases the chances of rare varieties slipping through unnoticed. And during the bicentennial run, multiple die hubs were used, some retired early, some modified by hand, creating micro-varieties that today command insane premiums. There are reports of a 1976 P quarter struck with a rotated reverse nearly 180 degrees, combined with a broad strike that flattened the rim into a smooth, metal-like edge, a feature so visually striking that when it appeared at a closed-door auction preview, seasoned dealers reportedly went silent, realizing they were looking at something that might never appear again. This is not just about money. It's about owning a piece of American minting history frozen in a moment of controlled chaos. And that emotional pull is what drives collectors to push prices into the stratosphere. Imagine being the person who pulls this coin from a drawer, thinking it's worth 25 cents, only to discover it could rewrite your entire future, pay off generations of debt, buy homes, fund dreams, all from a single quarter. That emotional fantasy is very real, and it's why demand never fades. Remember this, because coming up next is another 1976 quarter that looks nearly identical at first glance. Yet its backstory is even more controversial, and I'll remind you again in a moment so you don't miss it. The bicentennial era also coincided with metallurgical experimentation, as the mint tested different clad bonding techniques to improve durability, and some 1976 P quarters exhibit unusual ringing tones when dropped, a telltale sign of off-standard composition, and those coins, when paired with extreme die errors, sit at the top of the value pyramid. Grading services rarely certify these coins publicly, often labeling them as unique experimental strikes, which only fuels mystique and drives prices higher, because the fewer labels exist, the more legendary the coin becomes. Real finds continue to surface, including a story of a retired factory worker who discovered a strange, heavy bicentennial quarter while sorting through his late father's belongings. A coin that looked wrong, felt wrong, and ultimately turned out to be right in every possible way, sending shockwaves through the collecting community when its authenticity was confirmed. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, and that thought alone should keep you watching, because once you understand what to look for, you can never unsee it. And before we reach the end, let me remind you again, the next coin in this sequence comes from the same year but a different mint, and its narrative escalates everything you think you know about rare quarters. So don't go anywhere. As we wrap up the saga of the 1976 P quarter, understand this: its $76 million valuation is not about hype, it's about singularity, provenance, and the undeniable truth that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones we overlook daily. And if you thought this Philadelphia quarter was unbelievable, the next coin is even more shocking, even more disputed, and its story begins the moment someone noticed a tiny letter beneath Washington's head. So stay right here, because next 1976 D quarter dollar is about to change everything you think you know about pocket change. Next 2014 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story you'd laugh at until it actually happens to someone just like you. Because today we're talking about the 2014 P quarter dollar, a coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have held it, spent it, and forgotten it, yet a tiny handful of examples are rumored to be worth an almost unbelievable fortune. And the shocking part is that this coin didn't come from ancient history or a pirate chest but from modern America, meaning it could still be hiding in circulation right now. And before you dismiss that idea, remember that some of the most valuable coins ever discovered were ignored for years before one sharp-eyed person realized they were holding history in their palm. And by the end of this story, you might never look at a quarter the same way again. The 2014 P quarter dollar, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, has been whispered about in elite collecting circles because certain ultra-rare examples are estimated to reach values as high as $14 million when the right combination of errors, preservation, and provenance collide. And yes, you heard that correctly, a modern quarter potentially reaching 8 figures, which sounds impossible until you understand how modern minting mistakes, limited discovery, and collector psychology can turn a 25-cent coin into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And I promise you that if you stay with me until the very end, you'll not only understand why this coin is so powerful, but you'll also want to hear about the next coin in this series, which might be even more shocking and is the reason many viewers binge-watch these stories without realizing how much time has passed. To truly understand the 2014 quarter dollar, we need to go back to the moment it was born, because 2014 was a pivotal year in the America the Beautiful Quarters program, a multi-year series celebrating national parks and historic sites across the United States. And in that year, the Philadelphia Mint struck quarters honoring Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Shenandoah National Park, Arches National Park, and Great Sand Dunes National Park, producing hundreds of millions of coins intended for everyday use, but massive production is exactly what makes rare errors so dangerous to overlook. Because when machines are running at full speed, microscopic mistakes can multiply before anyone notices. And in 2014, the Philadelphia Mint was under intense pressure to meet circulation demand while transitioning equipment and dies that had already seen heavy use. Collectors later discovered that a minuscule number of 2014 quarters exhibited extraordinary anomalies, including extreme double dies so dramatic that the design elements appeared to vibrate, off-metal strikes where the coin was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, and even ultra-rare transitional errors where the wrong alloy composition was used, resulting in weight and color differences that immediately raised red flags for experts. And while many minor errors are common and worth only a premium, a perfect storm of conditions created a microscopic population of quarters that became the stuff of legend. One of the most talked about varieties involves a 2014 quarter struck on a silver planchet left over from a test batch, something that officially should not have happened, yet metallurgical analysis on a discovered specimen showed a silver content inconsistent with standard clad composition, and when paired with a razor-sharp strike and near-flawless preservation, that single coin set off a chain reaction in the numismatic world, because it challenged assumptions about modern mint controls, and proved that even in the age of automation, mistakes can slip through, and those mistakes can be priceless. Auction houses initially dismissed the idea that a modern quarter could command serious money, but once third-party grading services authenticated the coin and confirmed its abnormal composition, the conversation shifted overnight, and private collectors began quietly reaching out, offering 6 figures, then 7, then 8, as rumors spread that fewer than 5 such examples might exist. And that's when the $14 million estimate entered the discussion, not as a guaranteed sale price, but as a reflection of what a desperate collector might pay to own a unique piece of modern American minting history. What makes the 2014 quarter dollar especially fascinating is that it lives at the intersection of accessibility and rarity, because unlike ancient coins locked away in museums, this quarter began its life in everyday commerce, meaning it could have passed through cash registers, vending machines, and pocket change jars without anyone realizing what it was. And even today, there is speculation that undiscovered examples could still be sitting unnoticed in homes across the country, waiting for someone curious enough to check dates, mint marks, weight, and design details under proper lighting. Collectors chase this coin not just because of its potential value, but because it represents the thrill of the hunt, the idea that knowledge can transform the mundane into the miraculous, and stories have already circulated about people who found unusual 2014 quarters and nearly spent them on coffee before a last-second decision to look closer changed everything. One such story involves a retired machinist who noticed that his quarter sounded different when dropped on a table, producing a higher-pitched ring. And while that might sound trivial, experienced ears know that sound can reveal composition, and that curiosity led him down a path of testing, grading, and eventually receiving life-altering offers. And while not every unusual quarter will lead to that outcome, the possibility alone keeps collectors searching. As demand grew, auction history became part of the legend, with private sales shrouded in non-disclosure agreements and whispered numbers that only fueled speculation. And while public auctions have yet to fully reveal the upper limits of these coins, experts agree that a flawless, confirmed ultra-rare example could rewrite expectations for modern coin values, especially as younger collectors enter the market with fresh enthusiasm and a fascination for contemporary rarities. The psychology behind this is powerful, because modern-era coins tell a story that feels reachable, a reminder that history isn't always distant, and that realization has driven intense competition among collectors who want to own something that bridges the past and present. If you're watching this and thinking it sounds too good to be true, that skepticism is healthy, but it's also exactly why so many treasures go unnoticed, because most people would spend a 2014 quarter without a second thought, never imagining that tiny differences in metal, strike, or design alignment could mean the difference between pocket change and generational wealth. And that's why awareness matters, because knowledge is the first step toward discovery. Before we move on, I want you to stay with me because this is just the beginning, and the next coin we're going to talk about comes from the same year but a different mint, with its own shocking backstory and a twist that has left even seasoned collectors arguing late into the night. And trust me, you don't want to miss how that story unfolds. As we wrap up the tale of the 2014 P quarter dollar, remember that its power lies not just in the money but in the lesson it teaches, that ordinary objects can hold extraordinary secrets, that curiosity can change lives, and that sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, because just when you think you've heard it all, the story continues in a way that will make you want to check every single quarter you own.